Welcome back to another episode of On Background, a production of the Government Accountability Institute. I'm Eric Eggers, joined as always by Susan Crabtree. It is On Background with Susan Crabtree. Susan, California has a number of problems, and as more people kind of join something that you've been leading in for some time, taking a peek behind the curtain, seeing just how poorly run the state is, the number of problems only continue to grow. And maybe the best metaphor for how poorly California appears to be run was exemplified by this attempt to have a debate for the next governor earlier this week.
Yes, that's right. This debate at my alma mater, University of Southern California, imploded earlier this week. And it was just a sign of all of the problems, the internal firing squad, the dumpster fire that is California right now. I don't think that there's more incompetence going on and fraud going on in the state. I think people are just starting to care about it because suddenly they realize it could be coming to a city and state near you if Gavin Newsom reaches the White House, as we all know he wants to do. Yes, this debate was quite interesting, Eric. It was the fact that they couldn't even pull this off because Democrats were complaining and playing the race card is just, par for the course in the state.
Yeah, it's really interesting and maybe not something you would have expected that the first California debate, this USC professor, Christian Gross, comes up with this formula that's 65% based on the score, based on polling, and then 35% based on fundraising. And the math yields, unfortunately for California gubernatorial candidates, only white candidates: Steve Hilton, Chad Bianco, Eric Swalwell, Katie Porter, Tom Steyer, and San Jose Mayor Matt Mahan, excluding minority candidates, including Xavier Becerra, Tony Thurmond, and Betty Yee, and Anthony Villaraigosa. So I guess, number one, as someone who's been observing California politics for a long time, what was your reaction to that? And you've got some really interesting reporting on what the sort of tipping point was when they kind of made this sifting, for lack of a better term.
Well, the real thing that stuck in their craw, the low polling Democrats, that's what Steve Hilton called them in his interview with me yesterday. The low polling Democrats were all minorities, but then they had Matthew Mahan, who's the San Jose mayor, he's more of a moderate, get included in the debate, even though he was polling in the low single digits, just like these other candidates were. And lo and behold, he is a white candidate. So what was USC doing to include him? Well, there's some ties between USC and Matt Mahan, but also they were evaluating the fact that he was able to get into the race late and really intensify his fundraising machine out of the Silicon Valley, where he's close to in San Jose. So that was the straw that broke the camel's back for this group of low polling Democrats who happen to be minorities. And they put the pressure on, and they got out the political machine in one party controlled California. And Rivas, the top leader in the legislature, came in with guns barreling, and he had these minority groups with him in the state legislature and said, USC, you have to do this. You cannot exclude all these minority candidates. And USC, which used to be this more of a conservative island and a sea of liberalism and academia in California, they buckled like a cheap suit. They folded like a cheap suit. It was quite something to watch and saddening for me. But it just shows how ridiculous California is. They can't hold their second televised debate with 2 months to go before ballots start coming out for the June 2nd primary.
Yeah, I think that there's a couple things that this is indicative of, and we've got some very good investigative reporting on other things that have happened. If California can't organize a debate, like they also are not very good at organizing and stewarding taxpayer money towards projects, and you've got some really fun stuff on that. I would also say I think it speaks to a larger trend that just Democrats in general don't appear to be super comfortable admitting out loud. But you and I spoke briefly about the Stephen Colbert and the interview he did with the Texas Senate candidate James Tallarico at the expense of Jasmine Crockett. And then they said, well, we're not allowed to air it, but it created some media and kind of elevated Tallarico at the expense of a minority candidate on behalf of these white elites. And just something I've paid attention to since he started this, Gavin Newsom, he's running for president. And there's a lot of things that are coming out that show that he might not be, he doesn't have an elite administrative track record. Let's just say that. But he also, because he's trying to win an election, and, we're not too far removed from Democrats having elevated an African-American woman without having held a democratic process, and they seem to kind of be going another way. Gavin Newsom starts his podcast because he's like trying to kind of branch out, and just his first 10 guests are all white people. He doesn't actually have an African-American female for a number of months until after he starts his podcast. Jasmine Crockett was the first one. Doesn't have an African-American male. He starts his podcast in March, Susan. Eric Holder, his first African-American male guest in October. So it's just interesting the people that Gavin Newsom has chosen to reach out to, the people he's chosen to elevate and platform. And so the criticism of Democrats being a little racist is just interesting when you put it in that context. But Gavin Newsom's got bigger problems than just maybe not being the most equitable person in the world. He's also not a very good administrator of tax dollars.
Yes. And yesterday earlier this week, we had the perfect illustration of this, the perfect juxtaposition. You had Bill Clinton, Gavin Newsom, and Willie Brown, notoriously, who was basically the benefactor, if you will, for Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom's political rise out of San Francisco. They all were powwowing together and chatting, and there were pictures of them that a former Politico reporter was putting out there with no commentary. Just look at them chatting away here. They were visiting with Bill Clinton, most likely talking about his White House aspirations, but at the same time, that same day, there were news reports exploding out of LA that there were homeless people living in the sewers of LA with a grand photo spread. And so this is what the context that we are having this new debate about who's going to be running California after Gavin Newsom leaves, and whether he has a real shot and deserves a real shot at the White House, and what that will mean for the country. In terms of the incompetence, I am part of a new group of reporters that is trying to expose more fraud. Everybody seems to care about fraud now in California. You and me and the Government Accountability Institute, with my co-author Jed McFadder, have spent years exposing the corruption in California with our book Fool's Gold. But these are really funny incidents that so far this new group with the Manhattan Institute has been able to expose, including a butterfly and cougar bridge to nowhere.
Yeah, and we actually, because of the investigative work that's been done, we have a video of one of the people. This is beyond parody. It's so weird. It's not AI. It's not satire. It's not SNL. This is real stuff. Here is a video of someone who's apparently and allegedly in charge of or involved with at least the construction of the Wallace-Annenberg Wildlife Crossing, which has been pointed out, and this is unbelievable. This is something whose price tag is now exceeded over $100 million. But more importantly, this wildlife crossing, which is meant to protect, I guess, panthers and other species, and you can talk more about that, if completed on time, will take longer to build than the Golden Gate Bridge, which was constructed nearly 100 years ago. But here's video of one of the people involved with this, and you can kind of give some context around this.
When we started stage 1 and we're waiting to start stage 2, the world changed beneath us, though. This spring, construction costs increased considerably. And although we were holding reserves to finish construction, all those are exhausted at this point because of tariffs, inflation, and so many other factors impacting construction projects, not just ours. So we need your help one more time to get us to the finish line and help us build back those reserves so that we can ensure that we finalize construction by November, so we can all cut that ribbon together. What a moment that will be. And like you, I can't wait to see that first mountain lion cross. The promise to P22 will be fulfilled, and the Santa Monica Mountain wildlife will have a future because of all of you. Please donate today to Save LA Cougars, and we're going to complete this together, this dream that we started. Thank you for being a part of it.
So that's a real thing, Susan, right? What is that? Who is that, and what is the P22 that's on her shirt?
The P22. Okay, so you aired. I won't fault you because it's a Florida, California thing. They're not panthers in California. They are cougars or mountain lions.
In Florida, they're panthers. In Florida, they're
Right.
panthers. Okay, excuse me.
You got it, right? So we have the mountain lions. You have the panthers. I don't know if your panthers are as endangered as our mountain lions. But this bridge that P22 stands for, one of the famous mountain lions that I think they were tracking for a very long time in LA. So, but this bridge, that woman was Beth Pratt. She's a left-wing activist in charge of building this $114 million cougar and butterfly bridge. Never mind that butterflies fly, so they don't really need a bridge. But this woman has turned this into a boondoggle. It's 20 million plus over budget. And it's, like you said, it's 5 years in right now. It's still not finished. It's like the bridge to nowhere because the overpass is done, but they have spent so much time. It's been a job creator for left-wing activists. They've actually been funneling cash into spending months, a team that spent months roaming the Santa Monica Mountains in sacred solitude, collecting seeds and berries. This is how they're spending California's taxpayer money. We also had a indigenous person. A lot of the part of the project was just all they would do is hire indigenous people. And one of them tells a story about how she was providing offerings of native tobacco and human hair to their sacred plant relatives to sort of honor the bridge and I guess create some good karma. But no, this is par for the course in Gavin Newsom's California. And that's why what we're trying to expose. And he's quite proud of this project. He had a ribbon cutting ceremony for the beginning of it. And he was saying that this was just it's perfect. It's so, cutting edge. It's going to do all these wonderful things. But if you look at a map of what the area is connecting it to, it's a wildlife area that this bridge connects right into a neighborhood. So even if it's successful in bringing these mountain lions, it could bring them right into a neighborhood where they're attacking cats and dogs. I mean, it really doesn't make a lot of sense. Maybe spending, usually, I think that there are these bridges I've researched in other states, in Washington and other places, that are costing $5 million, and they do prevent accidents and the bridges and, deaths of deer and other animals. So that's good. But this price tag is far higher.
Just to say that another way, you said in other states, a similar idea can cost $5 million. But in Gavin Newsom's California, the same thing is A, delayed, and B, now will cost over 20 times that. And to your point, one of my favorite phrases, Susan, is, and I learned this from a guy who was in the legislature in Florida a long time ago. He said, today's problems are yesterday's solutions. And so the idea is like, this is a solution to solve this problem now, but it's going to potentially create a new problem, which is you're now going to give these mountain lions direct access to suburban neighborhoods where children and pets and things are playing. In Tallahassee, where I live, in 2010, when Barack Obama took over, the whole thing is like economic stimulus. So you remember the phrase shovel-ready projects.
Oh, yeah.
So anything that you guys had that was shovel-ready, the government was going to fund it. And so we had our version of this was called a turtle tunnel, and it was also lampooned nationally. We built a tunnel underneath a highway so that turtles could get from, they wouldn't have to literally cross the road. They could get from like one side of the road to another, from one waterway to another. And what happened was alligators just hung out in the thing and ate the turtles. So, but that project only cost $3.4 million in 2010. So these things happen, but it's so on brand for Gavin Newsom to not just have it be late, have it be way expensive, but then also involve people like that. What's the reaction been to the reporting now that this project is getting more exposure and people sort of see not just how expensive it is, but maybe who the extra characters are around it?
Yes, we've had people weighing in on this story. Sean Duffy, the transportation secretary, weighing in, and hopefully he might even do something in terms of, punishing this type of behavior, to keep withholding federal dollars, or at least calling it, questioning it in terms in their budget, in the budget outlays to the state. But it has been lampooned on the Babylon Bee. You had a trash can, and Gavin Newsom manages to erect a trash can, and it only costs, $50 million. They are so great at that. But this was not the only thing that this new group of reporters out here exposing fraud has uncovered just in the short time that they've been up. They've also found out that San Francisco Mayor Daniel Lurie, he criticized this project when he was running, that was basically a benefit program for Black San Franciscans. And that's really not at the federal level. That it violates so many civil rights laws. I'm sure Harmeet Dillon is going to be all over this, but it's known as the Dreamkeeper Initiative, and he actually relaunched the program, granting it $36 million for community-serving organizations, but most of them are Afrocentric and involve things like, parties for only Black drag queens only, African ancestry DNA testing, free doulas for African American birthing people. The list goes on and on.
So here's the irony, as a way to kind of combine two of the stories we talked about thus far. And I'll ask you to, I know you can't say for certain, but I'm interested in what your assessment of the answer would have been. This seems like exactly like that project you just mentioned, San Francisco, the wildlife bridge for panthers for cougars and butterflies. Seems like something that would have been brought up in a California gubernatorial debate. And again, it's worth pointing out that the USC, that's a major institution. It's a real university. And they had a partnership with KABC and Univision, I believe. So you had major networks that had agreed, we're going to do this thing. And then people play the racism card, and so it gets canceled. But in addition to just being an interesting story, it also prevents an important dialogue by people that matter, so that California voters can make a decision. If we're not satisfied with this, then maybe we should select people who want to lead us in a different way. And that's a dialogue they were deprived of because of the decision to cancel this debate. I guess my question is, do you get the sense that there's any, obviously the Republican candidates would have appropriately made fun of this. Is there any sense of self-awareness on behalf of any Democrats that are running for governor that you're aware of that this thing is a disaster?
I honestly was wondering myself whether this was an attempt. The Democrats were in panic mode, and they were in some way, shape, or form trying to take the momentum out of the Republican candidates, because Steve Hilton and Riverside Sheriff Chad Bianco are leading the pack at around 16-14. Hilton has about 16%, Bianco has 14%, and then the rest of the pack of candidates, the top tier Democrats, including Eric Swalwell and Katie Porter and Tom Steyer, are all around 10%. And then you have the other pack down in around the low digits, single digits. So, there was the Democratic Party chairman in California, Rusty Hicks. He said that in earlier this month, about early March, he said, I think he wrote an open letter saying this Democratic field needs to winnow. You need to narrow it. Jump out if you have no viable path to victory. This is ridiculous. And they just didn't. They're refusing to get out. And so now it was Paul Mitchell, the guy who wrote, he's a Democratic operative in California. He wrote the gerrymandered maps. And according to his estimates, there's an 18% chance that both Hilton and Bianco could move on to the primary, because it's the two top vote getters in California, can move on to the general and emerge from the primary. And we might not even see Eric Swalwell or Katie Porter or Tom Steyer. Tom Steyer, by the way, has spent upwards of $80 million on ads, just television ads, blanketing.
Hey, listen, a friend of mine is a media buyer, and he placed Tom Steyer's media ads in his 2020 presidential campaign. And my friend did very well professionally because, he dropped a lot of money on that stuff. No, that's the real thing. By the way, the direct quote, which you have in your very good piece, is from Rusty Hicks. If you do not have a viable path to make it to the general election, do not file to place your name on the ballot for the primary election. He writes this in a letter, which is reasonable because he's attempting, as you said, he's like, look, we're trying to prevent two Republicans from being the guaranteed nominees for this. Like, we're trying to help elevate Democrats, whoever they may be. So if you don't have a viable path, the response from one of the Democrat candidates, Tony Thurmond, who happens to be an African-American, says, quote, our political system is rigged. The California Democrat Party is essentially telling every candidate of color in the race for governor to drop out. So poor Rusty Hicks, he can't win. He's trying to do what he can to protect the party, and then he gets accused of being a racist. That's what I'm saying. That the California Democrat Party seems like it's got a history of these racial allegations from within their own party. It's just fascinating, Susan.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting that the minority candidates haven't been able to break out of the pack. Now, Xavier Becerra is sort of the worst case scenario. He was HHS secretary under Biden. Why in the world he doesn't have a higher profile and he has a more robust campaign is beyond me. But if you look at the activity level of these candidates, Steve Hilton by far to the greatest extent has been blitzing the state, putting out policy papers left and right, and he has the momentum. Chad Bianco is quite close behind him, which is interesting because he has a real track record in Riverside County, but he also has upset the MAGA base by taking a knee in a BLM movement several years ago. So those two, that's where really the action has been. These other Democratic candidates now have been much more low key. Even Eric Swalwell. Now, that's not to say that I don't think that Eric Swalwell will be our next governor. I do think that Swalwell is going to be our next governor because people in California don't pay attention to these races until it's right on them. I mean, they're not getting their politics. They're not political. They don't consume politics like most people, of course, in Washington and even in other states that I know. So, I just don't think people are paying much attention yet. So I would say, Steve Hilton and Chad Bianco don't get too comfortable. I assume that the race is going to come down to a Swalwell versus Hilton. That's my prediction at this point.
Well, so two more questions from me on this, actually, about both topics, because I do think they're related. Like, I don't think it's an accident that the two candidates who are currently leading, they may be Republicans, but they've also been the two candidates who've been the most vocal, I would imagine, in criticizing the wasteful spending and the fraud that's occurred under Gavin Newsom's watch. And so I don't think it's, I guess, question one is, do you think it's fair to assign some correlation there? And if there is a popular support for people calling out the examples of fraud, it's not an accident. Two leading candidates are Republicans, and there's more people investigating fraud in the state than there ever have been before because there's more interest in it. There's more examples of it. And so do you think that will lead to, if a Democrat's trying to break out, I mean, what if the pathway for a Democrat to break out is to actually stand up and say, listen, what's happened under Gavin Newsom is wrong?
It's hilarious that you mentioned that because Tom Steyer was asked in a very high-profile interview for California. Ashley Zavala is one of the best reporters in Sacramento. She's the TV reporter. She asked Tom Steyer, would you give Gavin Newsom a grade? What grade would you give him for his record? And Tom Steyer, declined to say that. He said he wasn't following the record closely enough.
I'm running for governor, but I'm not following this like major story about the governance of this state.
Yes. Kamala Harris said that was her downfall when she said she wouldn't do anything differently than Joe Biden, right? She couldn't think of anything. This is very eerily similar. And Tom Steyer just couldn't come up with anything. Because honestly, in this state, there is sort of like this unspoken word that you cannot criticize prominent Democrats in the state, even if you're running to succeed them. And clearly they've had a terrible record. So, he actually has really effective ads. And I think they're kind of misleading. Steyer has talked about how expensive energy is and that the Public Utility Commission is in bed with the utility companies and there's rates are going sky high. So I feel like he's had some very effective ads, but he's not penetrating either. He's still stuck at that 10% range. I do think things will shift as we get closer and they're going to vilify Steve Hilton as a MAGA candidate that's pro-Trump, and that's what we're going to see as we head into the final stretch.
So listen, so to that point, and this is my last question, and I think it's an interesting thing that is a sort of way to end, to kind of combine both things. Do you think that Tom Steyer was reluctant to criticize Gavin Newsom because Gavin Newsom is so overwhelmingly popular as the governor of his state? Or do you think, like, why did Minnesota fraud happen to the extent that it did? And we spent a lot of time talking about that. There's clearly a willingness to allow fraud of a certain type to occur if it's happening in a certain demographic that's important politically to the politicians that run that state. The Somalis, as we said, like, you don't get elected statewide as a Democrat in Minnesota if you are cracking down on Somali community fraud. It's just not done. That's why you saw Keith Ellison meeting with the people who were committing fraud, right, a month before they were arrested. So I guess my question to you is, if California Democrats have a political correctness problem, is why they can't even hold a debate without, certain candidates of color. Do you think that one reason why they might not criticize fraud is because some of the people who have been overseeing the fraud and allowing it to happen just are too valuable of constituents to the people who are currently seeking their votes?
Well, absolutely. You see that. And you also have Somali fraud in California, interestingly enough.
Why not? Somali fraud for everybody.
You do, in daycares in San Diego, and that's been coming out. But also you have Armenian fraud, as we point out in our book, Jed McFadder's specialty. He really dove into that, and its connections to Adam Schiff, the state senator, one of the senators here, and longtime California congressman in Los Angeles area. So that's a problem. But I'm looking into, and I'm hoping to have this story come out very, very soon, is the immigrant industrial complex that under Gavin Newsom. Newsom has given out so much money to immigrant nonprofits. I'm talking hundreds of millions. I know GAI has done a wonderful work on the amount of money that it's given to 𝐃𝐿A, the California Humane Immigrant Rights of LA group that has lots of connections, big connections to the riots that happened last year. And it's been, state subsidized with our taxpayer dollars. But there's far more to uncover, and I'm looking into it. Hope to have that story ready if not in days, next week.
She's already an award-winning investigative reporter, and as she continues to emerge as her career as a podcaster, she just ended with what's called a world-class tease, ladies and gentlemen. So the California Immigrant Industrial Complex coming out soon. You just gave everybody a reason to continue to check out your reporting on your Twitter profile, on Real Clear, and the work that you're doing. For people that want to find out all the stuff you're doing, what's the best place for them to go to see all the different material and reporting you're producing, Susan?
I hope you will check us out on this On Background podcast and like us on YouTube. Also, I'm on X, as Eric is as well, Susan Crabtree. And my reporting you can find at realclearpolitics.com. And you click on authors, you can find my reporting from years and years and years. So also I'm contributing to the California Post as well.
She's all over the place, guys. She's Susan Crabtree. I'm Eric Eggers. This is On Background. Thank you so much for joining us. We know you have a lot of options. If you've enjoyed hearing this information and want to hear more of it, please like and subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you're choosing to do so. And leave us a comment. We love it. We read it. And we want to get this out to as many people as possible. So thank you so much. We'll see you next week.